Welcome to the Good Man Paradigm. I'm your host, Imogen Hobbs. I'm also the men's coach and founder of Change Channel Coaching. And on tonight's episode, we're going to get into the man they taught you to be versus the man that you really are. And I'm super excited to welcome Jaguar Heart, who is a men's coach here in Australia, who'll be joining me tonight. So welcome, Jaguar.
Thanks, Imogen. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, same. I'm really excited to get into this. So the whole premise of the good man paradigm is around the idea that men have been taught how to be good, how to provide, how to meet other people's expectations, keep others happy, and really, steered away from being themselves. And what we want to talk about and what we want to sort of explore in this is, what does it mean to reconnect with yourself, to be the version of a man that you wanted to be, and what had to be changed or challenged within yourself, your understanding, your learning, the way that you were raised to be able to make that shift from, I guess, I've heard you talk a lot about rites of passage and things like that. So the shift from boyhood or adolescence into manhood. So to kick us off, I would love to ask you who taught you and who surrounding that taught you what it meant to be a man as you were raised?
Yeah, man, it's such a good question. It was my dad. My dad was very stoic. He had this Aurelian type presence about him, very philosophical, very hardworking, super tough. He died 3 years ago. Super tough, like very, very old school, which I respect. I actually think we need more of that back in modern society with men, not from a place of suppression. I think we've become overly focused on the emotional man now, and you actually see the emotional man is now the most dangerous one, and where there's actually a call back to those traditional sort of stoic strong men because they have their emotions contained. But it was for sure my dad. I've got a son on the way. Actually, it's due in November. And so much has been coming up for me around my own father and how grateful I was to have him, because he was really, he just, all the good things I got from him. So he was the one that taught me. Now, I didn't go through this typical rites of passage with him, which I'll sort of explain throughout this conversation, no doubt. But he instilled in me attributes through osmosis as opposed to direct initiation, which have been the things that have carried me forward for sure. Like there's a stubbornness in me and a resiliency, and definitely a strong connection to stoicism. And the thing with stoicism, it's been demonized by people that don't understand it. It's never about suppressing your emotions or being emotionally absent. Rather, it's actually about being contained and in control of your emotions and understanding them. It's about mastering them. It's not about divorcing yourself from them. So yeah, I got to give credit to my old man. He was a great model for me.
Yeah, okay. And you've sort of answered the second part of that question that I had, but at what point in your life, or was there a point where you realized the model that you'd grown up with, that stoicism, that like relentlessness by the sounds of things as well, was there a point where you realized that whilst there are great attributes in that, and there are obviously very awesome parts of that, was there a point where you realized that you kind of had to break that model and build something entirely new?
No, I wouldn't say that I would break that model. I would say you would integrate it, and then you would allow other parts of yourself to emerge forward to become more balanced, because that drive and tenacity, it doesn't, you can't keep doing it into your 40s and 50s. It doesn't work. You're just not meant to. So there's two halves of a man's life. There's the morning and the afternoon. And the morning is all about drive and building something and status and pushing and that relentless nature. Whereas the afternoon is more about coming into that, the spiritual principle, which is more internal. So whatever you're not dealing with internally, you're going to be forced to make contact with through pressure in the system. And that it will always come in the form of crisis. So it'll be a breakup, divorce, health crisis, a breakdown of the body, whatever it is in that midlife stage from around 35 to 40. And all that is just an evolutionary process asking you to make contact with anything that you've not yet made contact with. So for the audience, I wasn't allowed because of my mother to experience joy when I was growing up. And so joy is the thing that's been coming into my life a lot, and a deeper sense of love and preciousness towards family. So all of those other attributes, the stoic, resilient aspect, is great because that allows you to hold the scaffolding up of providing for a family. But then the gentleness, the joy, the compromise needs to come in to be able to have a successful marriage and become a father, I think. So it's more about an integration rather than a getting rid of.
Yeah. And I think, for me, it's all around like breaking a cycle, and like I love that part around integrating and bringing it through, because there are so many attributes around, like, in my belief and my experience as well of generational inheritance, is that we're not going to outrun that, or we're not going to completely shift it in our lifetime. It's going to be the model that we grow through at every different aspect of growth in our lives. And one of the questions that comes up from what you just shared is, what was it about not being able to experience joy? And I've heard you talk about the mother wound, which I love hearing more about, but what was that for you?
Yeah, so children are, people always ask me, who do you look to for inspiration? And I'm like, dogs and children, because they're so present and loving, and they're just, they bring so much joy. I always think that if someone doesn't like dogs, there's something really really missing there. And so what would happen is, my mother's a devouring mother and a destructive mother. So there's 4 archetypes of the mother in the collective, and very narcissistic human beings. And I'm not talking narcissistic traits. I'm talking narcissistic personality disorder, which are 2 very different worlds. And the light in someone just sends them into a spiral. They can't handle it. They need to consume it, devour it, and destroy it. And joy as a child pushes on all the, you could say, the demons within the narcissistic parent. It can be a father too, it can be a mother or father. This isn't gender specific. My experience was just a devouring mother. And so what happened with that is, I learned from a young age that wasn't allowed, because I'd get attacked by her if I expressed that. So just an innocent, playful kid. I was actually a really happy kid, a super sensitive, love the outdoors. And then because of that attack in that family, and the thing is with the family, the narcissistic mother will create roles for the children. So I was the black sheep, not because that was my natural nature, but because she placed that upon me with golden child was my older brother, enabler was my sister, and lost child was my twin brother. So you can have multiple different experiences of the same woman in the same family. So joy was not allowed. So I had to protect myself by trying to keep her away from, I think there was a memory that came up. I don't think there was a memory, there was, but I think I was about 1.5. I remember being in a corner of a room and she was beating me. So I shut down at that age, and I was terrified. And so I built a lot of armor up in order to survive the world. But joy at that moment, like from there onwards, was shut down.
It's really fascinating that the premise that every child in a family has a different experience of their mother and father, and the way that they come through, whether that be the older child or the younger or the middle, or girls versus boys, and how we have those experiences. Did you need to integrate like those other personas that your siblings had as well, around like your journey and your understanding of that piece around, one, joy, but also the relationship dynamics with them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You can only have a relationship with someone to the depth that they know themselves. And my siblings are still, my sister's extremely traumatized by my mother. She's like, unfortunately, I feel for her, because my sister's a really sweet soul, but just been devastated by her. And so I can only meet her to the depth that she's gone to with herself. She's still very much enmeshed with her. My older brother I'm really close with. He was the golden child and I was the black sheep. And it's funny because those two are exactly the same. They just operate in two ends of the spectrum. So a black sheep will cop all the negative attack from the narcissist, so they move into defiance to keep them away. Golden child will get all the positives, so they move into compliance. That's why my older brother and I have never had an argument. We get on really well. So we have a really good relationship. And then my twin brother and I are like a stick has two ends. We're very different. I've got that stoic, relaxed, calm quality. He's like Kramer from Seinfeld. Like his energy's so erratic and wild, and he'll just be sitting there eating and like the fork will fly across the room. So it's wild to see. Like people don't believe he's my brother. That's our difference. So I wouldn't say that it was integrated, more rather than an acceptance of seeing the structure for what it is has allowed me to be able to accept them at a deeper level as well.
Yeah. This might be too personal, but
No, go.
do you still have a relationship with your mother, or any form of relationship with your mother now?
No, I don't. There's a point that you have to get to with that where you give them enough chances, where then you have to establish that this is a psychologically dangerous human being. And my mother would weaponize my father's health growing up. So she would say that myself, my siblings were going to kill our father multiple times a week. And so really deep fear of loss would kick in. My dad lived till he was like 87. So it was just manipulation the whole time. And what happens is they will pit the kids against each other to see whoever's going to give them the most love. And then she used that as a tactic and a weapon to control us. Mm-hmm. So a couple of years ago at Christmas, she said to me, she goes, "You killed your father." And I just went, "That's me done. I'm out." And this was 9 months after he died. And I just went, there's just certain places that someone's willing to go to be cruel. And that wasn't something that I was ever going to tolerate ever again. And that was a method that she used to control me growing up. And just in that moment, I was very calm and I just went, "I'm out. That's not okay for me anymore. I can't do this with you." So I was 40 at the time. So, it's like fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or whatever that is. Fool me any more than that, I deserve what I get. And 40 years of that it's just not something I was willing to go to ever again.
Yeah. And look, I have a similar sibling dynamic to what you were saying about your twin, but I also work with a lot of, so all of the men that I work with have issues and dynamic issues with family, and asking questions around like how do you know at what point to sever ties or to put boundaries in, or how to navigate those relationships. And one of the things that I see with that a lot is, again, like to the depth that or understand yourself, right? Like how much work and how much like structure and support and self-awareness and like self-development did you have to put in to be able to be at a point to say, actually, I'm done?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it was a long process, and there was the journey of self-discovery. I was always quite introspective, self-aware, but I was also very destructive in my teens and early 20s. And so all of that anger that was in me was bled out into street fights and martial arts and trouble with the law and all of that. And that was really just because I was a product of my environment and, taking responsibility for it to clean that up. But I went down a path of trying to repair the relationship, trying to make the relationships work. And there just comes a point where you sit there and say, this person's not willing to stop being an abusive human being. And when that happens, you have to make a decision about what's best for you, because we give family carte blanche. For those that don't know what that means, it's like blank check to do whatever you want. And I just think we're all adults now. I don't need a mother anymore. She's an adult woman and I'm an adult male. And if you're going to treat me like that, if you didn't have the title of mother, then I wouldn't want to know you. And this isn't through my behavior, it's through her behavior. And so because I've got a son coming through, my older brother and I were talking about it, and he's like, "Are you going to tell her?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And he said, do you think that's a bit harsh? I said, she's out of my life. Like that, if she treated me as a little boy the way she did, never in a million years am I going to let her near my son. I would consider it the same as putting my son near a dangerous animal. And I said, even if I wanted to, my wife never in a million years will let her near him. Never. It won't happen. And so just because there's the title mother or father, it doesn't mean that they should get access to you if they have a history and pattern of severe abuse, which is what I experienced growing up, like really troubling psychological and emotional abuse, that now even stepping into the role of the father has become even more reinforced. I cannot believe that a mother could do that to a child. I can't cross that bridge. I don't understand it. And it's not a language that I want to understand either. And this might be hard for people to hear, but my healing came through the separation process and the individuation process and moving away from it. And I've never been happier, more peaceful, more at ease. I've never had more love in my life. Just 2 days ago, I was saying to my wife, I just said, I just didn't think that I would ever have such a beautiful home with a beautiful family. Family's so precious to me. It's the most precious thing in the world. And I didn't grow up with that. And so having that now, it even reinforces how crazy it was, the system that I grew up in, and how that can actually be a willing exercise of a parent. And you got to take responsibility on all levels. And if I kept staying in that system, in my opinion, I would deserve what I get.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things that I say to the guys in all of our sessions. Like, it starts and ends with you. Like, your life is your responsibility. Your self-awareness, the rate to which you investigate yourself and understand yourself, like it's on you. And the experiences that you have based on that are like, a response of magnetism that is whatever you're programmed with is what you're attracting. It's not what you want. And one of the things that I have become really, like aware of in my own 15 plus years of personal development now is I know that I've been reading the book around like the body keeps the score, but the understanding you can have so much understanding, you can investigate, you can learn, you can develop yourself, but there's only so much that you can do in isolation before the body needs to be reprogrammed to match the new state of mentality. And the aspect of that for you that I'm really curious about is, in the same way that your father taught you how to be a man, your mother taught you how to love, really, right? And so how, rightly or wrongly, how did you go about, or did you find that there was a programming like physically around what you attracted in women over a period of time? And how did you understand that needed to change? And then, sorry, I'm loading you up with a question.
That's good.
But then on top of that, like how much adjustment did it take? Because I heard you speaking live about your wife the other day and the dynamic of that and how it formed. So how much adjustment did it take for you to be able to go like, this, I don't know what the mental process of that for you would be, but like that this is safe and I'm worthy of receiving this, and it's not going to fracture around me.
Yeah. So there's a fair bit in that. You're right. So the first thing was our mothers model and create our blueprint for love. And this will sit in our unconscious. So I chose women that were very abusive. That's what I considered love. I had one or two girlfriends when I was quite young. I think I was 18 and 21. They were phenomenal. They're absolutely amazing women. After that, about 22, 23, then I started going out with the women that were addicted to cocaine, pretty unstable, and that just was trauma bonding throughout, hoping that they would give me the love that my mother didn't give me. This was all unconscious. I wasn't aware of it, of course. And they just got more and more gnarly as I got older. And that's what I see happen when there's these maladaptive, abusive relationships. And again, I'm just talking about myself with my own mother. There's women that have it with their father. I'm not talking about that. And this is my personal experience. And it got more and more severe as I went along until I got into a relationship when I was 35 or 36 with a woman that was identical to my mother. And I nearly died from that relationship. It put so much stress on my system. And I didn't know what I was in. And I ended up with severe PTSD from it. People think PTSD is like, oh, bomb has to go off and you're under the desk and it's severe. It's not. I remember it's brought on through tactics of gaslighting, manipulation, or all this sort of stuff, which I won't get too far into. You can listen to my other
Over
stuff.
time as well, yeah.
And it breaks you down, and it puts such stress on the nervous system that I started to fade out. And there was one night where I was in bed where I woke up and somewhere between having a seizure or shaking, I don't even know. And I felt myself leave. I knew I was going to die, and I felt myself leave my body, and I crossed over into a field of white light. And then I was back in my body. I can't tell you that I died. I don't know. I wasn't hooked up to a machine or anything, but this whole world just went black, and I didn't care about anything else. I didn't worry about who was going to find me or anything like that. And it was the amount of stress that my body was under. And this is what I always tell people, that you can tell who's been in an abusive relationship by the one whose health is the worst. So when you've got two people going, they abuse me, look to the one who's got bad health. That will tell you. And over the time, I developed such immense. I had insomnia. I had pressure in my head. I'd lie down at night, and it would feel like my brain was being electrocuted. My blood was so thick that I nearly had a stroke. It was really, really, really hectic. And I got to that point in the relationship. She would use push-pull tactics. She'd break up with me, then pull back in, idealize me, then devalue me. And this was all the relationship with my mother. Mm-hmm. And so this woman was just serving a function. I chose to stay in it. It's my fault, my responsibility for staying in it. And then there was just a point where I said, if you threaten this relationship again, I'm out. And she threatened it, and I ended it, and I walked away from there. Then my father died a couple of weeks after that. So I was really put in it. And this relationship was very traumatic, very difficult. And then my father dying, and then one of my best mates died 2 weeks after that. And then my godfather died 2 weeks after that. And this was all in a 6 to 8 week period. It was really intense. I still wasn't fully aware of what I was in. And then she went away overseas to see her family. And she just sent me a simple message asking how I was. And I went into shock, and I started shaking. And in that moment, that's when I knew. I was like, oh, this relationship's making me sick. This is it. And from there, I started to seek help through EMDR therapy. And so this was me sorting out the relationship with my own mother. This was my individuation catalyst. This was separating from the mother. This was the initiation and the rite of passage that I had to go through. So amazing gift, absolutely amazing gift. I wouldn't change it, but very difficult to earn where I've gotten to on the other side of it. And so getting to that other side of it, which took a couple of years of like deep healing work, really moving through it, separating from the psychological constructs of my own mother, walking away from her, separating from the collective mother as well. That's another thing which I can talk about. The relationship that I was in was the catalyst for that. That ended. As I started to heal, like deeply heal those final parts, then my wife came into my life, and honestly, it hasn't been hard at all. She's such a wonderful person. She's the easiest woman in the world to love. So many lovable qualities, and she's just so giving and beautiful. So it hasn't been hard at all. And that's where I see men in relationships that are push, pull, struggling, thinking that it's love. And I'm like, I've been there, man. And that's not love. It's not.
Yeah. And you are right. Like you can see, who's breaking down in a relationship. Just like I think when relationships separate as well, you can see who was in which position by who takes care of themselves and goes inward versus who goes out and gets attached immediately and just moves on to the next one, hoping that it'll be better or whatever that narrative is. But
that's, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, that's a really key point to look at. I was single for 2.5 years. My ex got into a relationship with a guy she was speaking to while we were together a few weeks later. So they're telltale signs as well.
Yeah, I see it all of the time. I help a lot of men through divorce and separation and things like that. And around, like I talk to a lot of people around like a minimum of a 12-month period to be able to detox someone else out of your system and then reconnect with who you are, because that, like that psychological abuse that you're talking about really is that, like gradual breaking down of a person. I also know that quite intimately, and it is, like so many people look at people in abusive relationships and say, well, why don't you just leave? And it's like, well, that gradual erosion of a person's fortitude and spirit and and value is so destructive over such a long period of time that it makes it so hard to leave until there is a cataclysmic moment, or that's when you first like at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about the some form of destruction that comes into your life that causes change. And we do see that with burnout or redundancy or marriage separation, or like health injury, things like that. And that if you don't take the invitation, life will create that like destruction, so that you have no choice but to change. And it sounds like you really went through that forcible rites of passage with relationship loss after relationship loss, all within such a small period of time. How did that reconfigure you? Because that is such a lot of loss and such a lot of realization in such a short period of time, but that covers such a spectrum of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see it is we're run by the ego consciousness, which is our programming. That's that outward, status, money, success, achievement. And I did very well in that world. It worked really well for me. But life was just saying, no, where you're going, you can't take that with you. So I needed the necessary force to match the barriers that I'd built up to connecting with my true self, with my heart, with the love that's in me, with that sensitivity, to be able to go into the next stage, which is what my children are going to need from me, from what my wife needs from me. You can't be that all performer, which is the problem with the manosphere and the red pill space. It's all boy psychology that's been frozen in arrested development. It works for the first half of your life. I really want to be clear with that. It's great for the 20 to 30-year-old full of testosterone that wants to prove himself in the world. Go and use it. Yeah, like the chest beam. I did that with martial arts. It was all about it. But men need that. It is a good thing to do when it's with the right men. I don't agree with the sleeping around and all that stuff. I did that. I was a major playboy. That's probably my biggest regret, is sleeping with women I didn't care about. I would never do that again, and I don't recommend that to men. That was a mistake that I made because I didn't have good, solid, masculine male men around me to say that's not the way. And so life had to literally take it all from me, and it did. And I didn't want to let it go, but I learned that there's a larger force than me called life, which is like, no, this is what you've got to do. So it really restructured me in a big way. And that restructuring is still happening, especially with my son coming along, having to hold it all down.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
But like that's your next, that's that
It's
next
next
right
stage.
passage for you. Yeah.
Yeah. But this one, I'm willing to let go what needs to be let go of. I'm like, if you want it live, take it. One of the things that I think so many people get caught up in is the distinction between ownership and being a custodian. People in this world think they own something. I take the approach, I'm a custodian, where I got to give everything back to the ether at some point. And what that does, it brings me into relationship with the thing that I have. So it might be, I don't know, property is a big one, or a car, or a relationship. I don't own any of that. I'm just holding it until someone else takes takes custodianship of it. And that includes my relationship, includes my child, includes my dog, includes where I live. It includes all of it.
It includes your body, right?
Yeah. We're just custodians. We're here just for a short journey, and that brings you into presence with that. You want to be present with something? No, you're going to lose it.
And that's life, to summarize, right? Like at the end of it, like that's the here and the now, the meat suit, the what we're experiencing is that, like, that doesn't really, like, the lessons of that do come with us, I believe, but the reality of the physical is all,
it's transient. Yeah. People identify with the material as the truth, but if the truth doesn't change, if it can change, then it's not the truth. It's very simple. And if you're living the truth, then your life works. People ask me that, how do I know I'm living my truth? I'm like, well, your life will work. And where it's not working, it means that's out of alignment. So you're not necessarily living in the truth.
Yeah, which is the signal would be of friction, right? Or of flow.
Yeah.
So if there's friction, then something's not quite lining up, something's not quite there. And that, version of your truth as well, which is like, are you thinking, speaking, and acting in alignment in the same way? Or do your thoughts say one thing and your voice says another, and your actions are slow to pick up the pace, sort of thing? Like that would show us that there's friction, but there's so many people in that state of, like disillusion.
Yeah, and resistance too. Yeah. Resistance to what is. Yeah, that's a big one. And that's another part that I look to as well, is that, that's pressure. Resistance is pressure.
Yeah.
And when you're resisting something, it means there's a truth versus a falsehood that are in conflict with one another. And the root of every single problem is conflict. You source everything back, it's conflict. It creates every problem. What's going on in the world at the moment, bodily things, everything is about conflict. That's it. So when you're in the nature of, say, the true self, there's an absence of distortion through programming, and then conflict subsides. There's no conflict.
Well, conflict creates distraction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why people want to numb out and get away from things, because they don't want to deal with the conflict.
Yeah. What would you say is the most like underrated, or maybe underrated and simultaneously overrated, thing that men, like have access to, but don't really see that they could take a step to change? Like, you've obviously done a lot of work, and you've been through, some pretty, like a pretty big baptism of fire, I would say. And so, like, if you could look back with hindsight, what were the, like the quiet moments that you maybe didn't rate as an invitation for change?
That I didn't rate? Yeah, look, I was pretty stubborn, so I didn't listen. Like, it was, I think it's called the feather or the brick or something like that. I was tapped on the shoulder.
Yeah, or the Mac truck.
Yeah, and then it was life sent me in what it needed to in order to do it. So one of the things is, I think the most underrated is the resistance aspect. For sure, that's an underrated signal to change. Life is asking you to go into it. The other thing, the overrated aspect, is you just can't muscle your way through it. You just can't. Like, you can, like, I mean, I think, hitting the gym and getting strong isn't going to give you the psychological strength to when it matters. Like, physical strength, sure, like that'll be good in your 20s, and that'll start to taper off towards your late 30s. Too many men are really focused on that. I think that's going to get them through, and it just doesn't. A physical outlet is important, but you can have all the muscles in the world, but if your psychological game's not strong, you're done. Yeah. And that's why a friend of mine, we were talking about this recently, and he's still very much in the warrior. And he's like, it's all right. You're becoming like the wise old king now. And I said, yeah, and who tells the warriors what to do? The wise old king. So your muscles are useful, but they're not the thing that gets you to the top of your life. And I'm not talking about dominating or owning everything or conquering necessarily anything except yourself. But wisdom is the thing that will get you there. Wisdom and humility are the two things that help you sit in a life that's generative, that helps others, and becomes one of voluntary self-sacrifice, as opposed to selfish narcissism, which is all about me, which is what we live in at the moment. So the most underrated is like addressing the resistance and surrender. And the most overrated is the muscle head that tries to push through.
Yeah, yes. I get so many men that come to me and they just go, oh yeah, I'm going to the gym. And I'm like, you're only as strong as your mental fortitude can understand you. So
yeah.
if like, I spoke to a guy from the army a couple of weeks ago, and I said, yeah, but what about understanding, like your vulnerability? And he said, well, it's been drilled into me that vulnerability is weakness, and you must not show any weakness. And I was having this conversation with him about, like your vulnerability is only weakness if you don't understand it. Like, if you haven't explored it, then it becomes a weakness, because then anytime someone pokes it, it's a raw nerve and it fucking hurts, and you react and go into that cyclical behavior or programming. But the more that you understand about that, the more the more that you know about yourself, the more that you understand your triggers, what you've come from, what it was, without blame, the stronger you can become. Because, you know, like even with teams, like you're only as strong as your weakest person. And so if we navigate that, if more men can navigate that premise, I know that it goes both ways for men and for women, but we're both men's coaches, so that's our focus. But it is that, you know, like you can be stronger the more that you can be vulnerable without it being a weakness. What's your reflection on that sort of premise and that building of self and understanding?
Yeah, so this I think is a broad stroke is where I do have a problem with it. It depends on the environment. It's the most important thing is where you're opening up and giving your stuff over to. Yes, is the most important thing. So vulnerability plus safety equals healing, but vulnerability plus danger is more trauma.
Yeah.
That's where I split it. So I think we've unfortunately moved into a world where our partners have become like our therapeutic soothing ground. And this is where I say to men, I'm like, don't take all your stuff to your woman. Find out the ways that work for you in order to process it. So me, I'm very movement based. Most of my problems I don't need to talk about. And so my wife will know maybe 5% of the stuff I go through, only when it's really important. And I'm just like a rock for her. I'm solid. I usually like to work my own things out. You know, movement is a way that men will process emotion. I think it's why they say, like, go for a walk, calm down, cooler heads prevail, sleep on it. These old stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. The issue as well I have with the whole therapeutic pop psychology world is that, especially in the repair space, is we're not allowing for men and women who deal with things very differently to be honored through that. Women will typically want connection. Men will typically want disconnection. And then we're told that men are emotionally unavailable and all this other stuff, which goes against our biology. So when if I hit a point, I'll always say to my wife, I'm like, I'm going to go for a walk for half an hour or an hour. I'm taking the dog. I'll put a weight vest on. I'll go and move, and I'll just let that process a little bit. She will want connection. I mean, I think we've had 2 arguments in 2 years or something like that. So we're not a good example of conflict repair. But I was working with a guy that I've been training, and he wanted his wife to repair the same way he did. I'm like, you're treating her like a man. This is where it becomes a problem. So the vulnerability aspect is a delicate balance, because oftentimes women will want the man to emote like a woman, and that's not what we're supposed to do. And then he'll expect her to respond like a man. And this is where we just need to be careful with that. So it really is about the environment and understanding the complementary force of the woman or the feminine and the masculine. My wife's not built to take on all of my stuff, and I don't want to put all that stuff on her. But I'm there to hold space for her whenever she needs it without trying to fix her. And most of the time when she's got something going on, I put her head on my chest, I hold her, she'll cry. 3 to 5 minutes, I got her laughing. It's that easy. And that's what I teach men how to do, because you try to fix her, it's unconsciously dismissive. And then you're treating her like a man. That's the thing. So the vulnerability aspect is important, but even more important is the environment to which you're taking the vulnerability.
Definitely. I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think when that becomes the more that you understand yourself, the more you have clarity on boundaries and, you know, understanding of experience and exposure and the situations that you get into, but also that discernment about, you know, like, who are we sharing with and what are we sharing and what is the response or the reciprocation that we're looking for in that. And I think that also comes with the getting to know yourself, you know, like you're the only mountain in your life that you really truly need to conquer, in terms of, for men and women, I think, you know, so that we can understand who we are and have the courage to act on the invitations that come into our lives, rather than getting hit by the Mack truck and being taken out, right?
I agree. And so while there's the vulnerability is strength, resilience and capacity is also strength too. to be reliable. Like that's absolutely necessary. And I think we've overcorrected to a more of a feminized way for men at the moment. And I think the best men are the ones that are the most reliable, and you'll see that, one of the word I get most commonly associated with me is just I'm solid because I'm reliable. And my wife needs that from me. And I love to be that because it fulfills my biological role of being useful and purposeful and a protector and a provider, but also being able to access those other parts, which might require more sensitivity and discernment, like you were saying. Like even you need sensitivity to be able to understand where your limit is, where you're like, I'm stretched and I can't go there. I had one situation with my wife. She was just having a rough day. It was nighttime. I go offline at nighttime. Like men have 24-hour cycles, women have 28-day cycles, 1 day versus 1 month. And she came upstairs and, she was crying, nothing between us. And I said, come here, put her head on my chest. And she's like, you're not saying anything. I said, baby, I'm absolutely stretched. I'm at capacity. It's 9 o'clock at night. I don't have anything to say, but just know that I love you. And that's it. And so knowing where your limit is requires a sensitivity. And so knowing what you can give without pushing past that is really important, because that's where you start to erupt and then arguments happen at that point. So knowing that limit within yourself and not expecting your woman to meet you at that same place is very important.
Yeah. And I think, that's one of the aspects around, the difference between men and women as well. Often women will want to talk something out to process it, whereas men might, that movement aspect and the part which you were saying, around you just hold and allow. It's like women will move through their own emotions. And I say this all the time. It's like, I don't want someone to fix my shit. I can fix my shit. I know what's going on. I can fix it. I just need someone to hold me and say, there, you've got this, or nothing at all. And, I hear it a lot at the moment out in society and also online of, people want a healed relationship. They want someone who's already healed. And they don't, and they come in and they go to relationships and, oh no, there's too many red flags, or there's too many problems, or they're not properly healed. And it's like, well, how much of that do we need to be able to do in partnership, which is that we can't do it. And that's what we were speaking about before, right? Around the physical the physicality of it, which is there's only so much we can do on our own before we have to actually meet in those partnerships to then move that. And you said your relationship might not be the best one to look at for conflict resolution, but I think that is what makes it a great place to look for conflict resolution, which is that you don't reach the point of conflict because you obviously have, this is just a outside perspective, but that would say to me that you have really great communication.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was going to say, what did it take for you to get there?
Yeah, I had enough conflict in life and I just had enough of it. It's just, I was over it. My whole life fighting and protecting and being on guard. I was tired of it, man. I just was like, I don't want this anymore. I remember a good analogy for this was I remember when I started training martial arts in my early 20s, and I went in and the guy that ran the place was, he was like a light heavyweight world champion at the time, but this was before, and this was 15 years before he had his gym when I started training. And he was in the ring where you could headbutt and bite and he was full on. And I said, so I'm not sure what to do. I want to train martial arts or MMA. What's the best self-defense? And he said, don't be there. And it still resonates with me today. And I just went, no, that doesn't satisfy me. I need all of that. And what martial arts taught me over time was how not to fight.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And it's the same with a relationship. I don't want to have conflict with my wife. I don't want her to see her cry if we're arguing or feel separation. We've had arguments, very few, but we spend so much time together and we rarely ever push up against each other because we both understand that she's not responsible for my entire emotional state. She's not my mother. She's not responsible for pleasing me at every turn. She's not my slave. She's not my maid. Right? We have one need that we meet of one another. That's it. and the rest of my life is mine to deal with on my own, as is hers. She's pregnant at the moment, so it's a little bit different for the roles that I have to pick up and looking after the house and all that, which is fine. You know, you pick up the weight where the other one can't quite put it down. And I think that this expectation, like, people are looking for the red flags, you know, and out there in the social media world, I mean, this expectation that's not every woman, but it's a generalization, you know, 6 foot, 6 figures, millionaire, all this sort of stuff, like this long laundry list of expectations. Just try to get one thing, give one thing to your partner. My wife loves touch. I love acts of service. That's it. We have great communication because we don't expect each other to fulfill every single part of our desire of life. You know, a man's not meant to be a shopping buddy, a girlfriend, a best friend, a 50 Shades of Grey lover, a professional athlete, a chef, a cook, a billionaire. Like, that's so ridiculous. It's so delusional and ridiculous, that stuff. And just firstly, just try to be a good person for your partner and want to meet the need that they need the most. Just do that for 2-3 months.
And I think it's also just like trying to be a good person for yourself first and foremost, so that you can listen, you can hear that, you can, you know, like you have the sensitivity to be able to take that invitation, rather than what I see a lot of is, you know, people get into a reaction of he said, she said, or what I look at is competition versus collaboration. You know, like, are we in competition with our partners, which is we want them to make up for it, or we want them to show up, or we want this, or we want that, or it's on them, and putting us into competition, which puts us into conflict most of the time, because then we're, you know, like applying and plastering people with expectation, versus are we in collaboration, which is where are our strengths, where are our needs. And I remember I heard one from, I think it was Brene Brown, like ages ago, around, you know, like having that measure of like, you know, where is our 100%? And if one of us is at 20% and the other's at 80%, then what does that look like? And how do we have those conversations around, like, I just don't have capacity right now. This is what I can give. This is what I can do. This is how I can show up. But that being an open conversation rather than a applied expectation.
Or a demand even. And if you don't meet it, then, I'm going to go find that somewhere else. You know, people in our modern society have lost this ability to commit, and they're constantly chasing dopamine or intensity, which is very childlike, and relationships have gone awry, I think, because of that. And, you know, it's an important thing to be able to understand. The relationships come with difficulties. And so there's really 3 elements that you're going to go through. 1, you should live together. 2, you should travel together. And 3, one of you should get sick to see how it is. And we did all 3 of those. We, just by sort of random chance, we lived together from pretty much day 1 in our relationship, not intentionally, but my wife was house sitting, and then there were no houses available in Byron Bay. So just stay with me till you find one. And then a month or 2 into it, she just said, I don't want to go. I said, I don't want you to go either. So just stay. Then we traveled together. We went to multiple countries together. And then I got really sick. I had black mold poisoning, a host of health issues where I could barely get out of bed. And she looked after me. So relationships get tested through the big 3, which are those 3: living together, getting sick, and traveling together. If you pass all 3 of those, you got a good person.
Yeah. And, you know, probably one of the other ones that can be in that is the passing of parents, or the loss of loved ones, right? Around that grief, and how someone can show up for you, or, you know, like be there for you through grief and pain.
Yeah, super important.
One of the other aspects around that, like, I have a lot of guys at the moment that are moving from, you know, those childhood programs, and wanting to run, or wanting to get away, or wanting to stay on the move and always be busy, and you know, which would a lot be around the fight flight mechanism, and that needing to like constantly be going so that we don't have to feel anything, and so that we can avoid all of it, versus being in that state of whatever your personal level of equilibrium is, and your baseline, how long, because it sounds like you've gone through a lot, and just in reflection of around your relationship with your wife and what you were just sharing, and how that's moving for you, because there's been, friction and tension and a lot of controversy and arguments and things like that. How do you go into that, like, calm state from a place where you've probably lived most of your life in fight flight response?
Yeah, so you got to dissolve the identity, which is programming in the subconscious. So it's an identity that you're addicted to and attached to. And when that unconscious template starts to get activated, and that's what I consider love, when you start undoing those, then that will just dissolve and atrophy, and it will stop being enticing to you. So conflict and intensity for me was, it was stimulating. It was like drugs. And then now, I remember just before I met my wife, I met a woman in Italy, and she was very much of that. And after 4 days, I was just utterly exhausted, and I just couldn't stand being around her. I was like, I'm out of here. Like, this is the most repellent, repulsive, no. I was like, no. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, this was just a test and to see where I was at with things. But it didn't have that same magnetic attraction. I used to like the real wild women, like the wilder, the better. The more chaos, the more hate, whatever. But once I started to work on, the drama and the chaos, all of that, once I started to dissolve the identity around me, which was stuck in that, then that started to, like, it was like a fire that just went out and it stopped from there. So the subconscious realm is very important, especially for men. And what they'll do is they will look to those women if their mother was unavailable to meet their needs. So then they go and choose a woman that's unavailable because they're unavailable. I was massively unavailable. And this is what's called the Puer Aeternus, which is the eternal boy. So when the man goes next thing, next woman, next job, next career, next commitment, next goal, all of that is boy psychology. It's all this Puer Aeternus, the Peter Pan syndrome. It's why there's a lot of men that still feel like boys, because they haven't actually come from Never Never Land. And Never Never Land and Peter Pan is a very apt name, because they never finish anything. They never commit. They never go all the way. They never go all in. They never do that. That's part of the eternal boy, where they're floating around up in the sky. But the man is supposed to pull that down into reality and build something that's concrete, something that lasts, something that's meaningful. And so the way through that is they have to stop projecting, and they have to claw back all of their projections that they place onto the world, which is just a part of them that they're abdicating over to the world, and start taking responsibility for that. And so once you start doing that, when these men that are in that sort of Puer Aeternus stage, they will see their commitment as this white knuckle discipline, when that's not. It's compensation to not actually graduate into true commitment. It's like fear. It's like fear of commitment. Fear of commitment is still being committed to being afraid of commitment. So you're in a commitment, you just don't really know about it. But intimacy is scary to guys like that. I was terrified of intimacy for a long time. And so I thought intimacy was intensity, and it's not. And I mistook it for that. Once I did the work internally to clear that out, it resolved itself.
What would you say is the difference from a man's perspective of, like sexual desire, or just sex, or whatever that is, like the moving through them and the base need of pleasure and fulfillment, versus union and it, like actual intimacy? What's the difference between that from your perspective?
Well, one's using a woman, one's actually knowing a woman. That's the
For a
thing.
man,
So,
from a man's perspective.
Correct. Yeah, one's using a woman. So they're just using him for sex. They're just an object, right? There's no intimacy there. But intimacy is actually getting to know a woman and relating to a woman. That's the difference between the two.
So my more what I mean is like the process for self. So I get that part around it, and the outward part of that. But what's the internal state between, because I know what the feeling and the sensation and the difference is for me personally as a woman. And there hasn't been a lot of that union experience, which is, part of growth and part of understanding. But I can sense what the feeling and the sensation is between the difference of like wanting this and wanting that. Does that make sense?
So Yeah, so I guess I'll answer it in a bit of a different way. The thing that stops people achieving that is the unconscious bond to the mother.
Yeah.
Right. So what will happen with that is a man can't commit to a woman intimately and really get to know her and want to know her when he's still in an unconscious loyalty bind with his mother. And this might not be individual mother, it might be collective mother. So the collective mother is the gravitational force that gets activated through the individual mother. And there's 4 types. There's the divine goddess, which is kind of what the you see a lot of women in that space at the moment. It's Mother Earth and, sacred feminine and divine feminine and all that. All that's a collective mother bond. That's why when women get out of the new age, they go to religion, because that's the Virgin Mary. These are the 2, the good mothers. And then there's the terrible mothers, which are the devouring mother, which is like the old witch. And then there's the other side of that, which is the Kali archetype, which is the destroyer. That's more of like probably where the feminist movement is at now, which just wants to smash the patriarchy, destroy, anti-family, anti-natalist, all that sort of stuff. And the devouring mother wants to consume everything around it. And so what will happen is you'll see men that are attached to any of these won't ever be able to go really deep because they're still bound to one of these archetypes from a loyalty perspective, and they'll place them above the woman. They won't be able to meet the woman properly, not in a mature sense. And so just before they get to success, bam, this construct will pull them back in, and they won't even know it. No, like women are attached to it as well. I think it's what's the term? I think it's Puer Aeternus, which is the eternal girl. And there's Puer Aeternus, which is the eternal boy. And they'll each be connected to these archetypes. I saw one woman that I went back and forth with. She said, men are meant to split from the individual mother and get pulled into the great mother. And I said, no, that's not meant to happen. That's just going to a bigger force. And then men's development gets stunted at that point. They can't mature past a certain level. And then what happens is if they're in the devouring mother, they go out there to fight the Kali aspect, which is this is the manosphere versus the feminists. That's exactly what they're doing. That's the answer to it. So, but the issue is that the feminists think that they're the divine goddess, and the men are fighting the Kali archetype. And neither of them know it. So they're in this sort of collective war, which is where the division of genders is at the moment. And the social engineers have done a very good job at creating it. They know what they're doing.
Haven't they just? Yeah, over a very long period of time as well. And I see that that's why I do what I do. Like I grew up in a society of men that were not great leaders and, didn't have passion, didn't have self-awareness, didn't have direction. And I was, like part of the destruction of that, I think. And, like a lot of work and a lot of reflection is that I actually really want to, I want to see a world of men that are passionate and driven and focused on something and have that, like, I watched a interview with Grant Cardone and his wife, and she was saying, like that she had told him that he needed to go out and he needed to make $1 billion. And he was like, what the fuck, like, why are you, and, like, I can't do that. And she was like, yes, you can go and do it. And when they asked her why she said that, she was like, because if he focuses all of his capacity to create and to build and to produce and to inspire, if he focuses that on something, then he's driven towards that. But if he doesn't, then he'll focus it on me and our family, and it will implode because it's too much for us to be able to hold. And that comes back to what you were saying before around, like, your partner shouldn't be your everything, because, like, we need to have things that we're working towards, but men are outwardly creative. Like, women create life. We're inwardly. Yeah. And so when, like, when that sexual energy, that creativity, all of those things are focused in that destructive pattern, which is what you're talking about a lot with the mother archetypes and things like that, then it's internally or inwardly destructive rather than focused and creatively produced out there towards something. And I think that's, with the manosphere and feminism and all of those things, we've lost track of, like, the natural connection, the natural collaboration, the natural state of what we can do, what we can build, what we can create together and what roles we take up in that.
Totally. Fully agree.
I think. And so I think one of the aspects, so around that sexuality piece as well, when you go from that aspect of like using women or, you know, like destructive, whatever the pattern is, to that union aspect, how much more creative do you see men get when they make that shift?
Oh, you can't quantify it. It's exponential. You think you can do a lot on your own, but they're still oriented towards the feminine, even when they're afraid of the feminine or they're not committing to their woman. And this is where you see in society, it's like have multiple girlfriends or multiple wives or whatever. And that's part of the trap. You know, Tolkien, I love Tolkien's writings. He actually made me fall in love with language when I read Lord of the Rings when I was young. He wrote a letter to his son and he said, men are not monogamous, but you're not meant to indulge every women desire at every turn. That actually creates a man that doesn't have capacity, but rather it's in the denial of every whim and every desire that you become a man. And I agree with that. And you get to a point where there's such peace in my heart because I'm married and because I have a family that I look at men that are dating multiple, and I've done that. I had multiple girlfriends at once and it's exhausting. But you will do that to how many women you need to date will be directly correlated to how unavailable you are. And that's not just emotionally unavailable. It'll be psychologically unavailable. It's the kid in the candy store that wants everything. It's just childlike.
And everyone can only get a little piece of, you know, like a fraction of you because, you know, like there's only so much that you have for yourself versus how much you put out there as well.
Yeah. So
it is
the outcome. Sorry to cut you off. It's exponential and it's happened in my life. My health has improved since being with my wife. The peace in my heart and in my soul that comes from it. Family is the most precious thing in the world. When you get that right, there is nothing. But I've had it all. I've been a multi-millionaire. I've traveled the world first class. I've been to 70 countries or something. I've had all of that, everything at like the top degree. Nothing has come close to what it's like to have a family. Nothing. That's the true wealth.
And that comes back to like money. Money really can't buy you happiness. It can aid it, but it can't buy that. Like happiness comes from within, not without.
Yeah, I mean, money just solves your money problems. That's all it is. It's never going to buy you happiness. It's never going to do that.
How much? So many men come to me and say, you know, it's like, what is it that you're looking for? I want peace. You know, and I think, well, what the fuck does peace mean? That's the same as like, I want to be a good man. What the fuck does good mean? Like, what the fuck does it mean to have this thing that you can label, but you can't actually quantify? And what it sounds like you've created in your life with your partner, and that like, I no longer need to outsource. I'm no longer like looking for the things because I have it, and I've sustained that. You know, like I've built that around me. That's what that kind of sounds like to me.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at that, what do you think it takes to be able to understand your own level of peace and happiness?
I always look at peace as what it's an absence of, and it's an absence of conflict. And so when I'm looking at it internally, my relationship's just going to reflect my internal state.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So when I clean up my conflict between my false self and my true self, or my ego consciousness and performance identity versus my true self consciousness and my purpose identity, it becomes very different. And when your thoughts, feelings, actions are aligned with what you're doing in the world, there's an absence of distortion, which means there's an absence of conflict. I'm not trying to be anything that is not genuine. And that'll change too. It changes throughout life. But at the moment where I'm at, I'm encapsulated in immense peace because there's no inner distortions or conflict that I'm trying to work through at the moment. And that will change. My son will come along and it'll push on places that I can't access without him. And I'm prepared for that. And I'm as prepared as I can be. But as we go through this, even in the last sort of 6 to 9 months, I'd been in this depressive flat state because I was transitioning from one identity to another. And there's a dead zone in between that, which is a psychological flatness. And I just write it out. I tell my wife what's going on, and I just say, yeah, look, it'll pass when it needs to pass, and it will form the way it needs to form. So I surrender to it. And there's peace in the form of surrender, knowing that I can trust life will deliver it to me the moment that it needs to. And it did. And I saw it. And the moment that it happened, all my energy started to come back, and I was liberated from that. And so now it's more about joy coming out. It's more about a deeper access of love and care for my wife and my child, and a deeper commitment to sacrifice for them as well. And there's peace in that for me because it's not hard, it's natural. And so to come back to your answer around peace, most men don't know how to get there because they still expect the woman to bring the peace. She will be a reflection of the peace that's already within you.
Oh, it is that, like, you know, like, she's my happiness, or she makes me feel loved, or and that the loss of that, you know, like when a partner leaves, you know, like my world has ended because she was my reason, she was my all of those things, which is that, you know, like, no one else can be responsible for that for you. It's about taking accountability and authority over that for yourself, knowing that, you know, like, and for all of us, right, like men and women, it's like, if we can't take responsibility for those things, and we are outsourcing them to other people and making other people responsible for our state of being, that's, you know, like, they took from me, they took all my time, or they, you know, like, they used me. It's like, no one can have anything that you don't fucking give.
Yeah. There's no peace in that world.
No, there's not. And coming back to what you were just saying around that, like, you know, like that what did you call it? Depressive.
Dead zone? Yeah, the dead zone.
Do you think that that's around so what I would call the signaling system, which is like what kicks up your old programs to make you aware that something is changing? And do we fight that, or do we see that as an invitation and go, whoa, something big shifting, or something big is changing, and I'm going through a period that's preparing me for growth, or I'm going into growth, and my ego is kind of going like, fuck no, keep me somewhere where I'm safe, which is where I know, which is maybe uncomfortable, but the invitation for change. And so how has that aided your growth, and how long has it taken for you to get clear with, you know, because lots of people would go into that dead zone and be like, fuck, something's wrong, change things, you know, we've got to get on top of this. Whereas it sounds like you just went, oh yeah, we're here. Some big's coming. Yeah. Like, we'll go into this. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been there a few times, so I've mapped it pretty well at this point. So I know when I go into this, should I be doing this work anymore? Am I even good at it? Like, do I even want to be doing it? That's when I know, because all of those are thought forms that are coming from programming, which is trying to get me to snap back to my old programming. Mm-hmm. So when we're like, oh my God, I want to hold on to it, you know, I'll double down. I'll do another course. I'll offer another program. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang. Like, come on. I got to do it. I want to hold on. That's when you know that it's an old piece of identity trying to pull you back in to the thing that's trying to die. And the depressive state is the gravitational force pulling you down. So you're not motivated. So you're lacking meaning, lacking purpose, all of that at the time. So you'll go back to your original programming, and then the identity doesn't dissolve. That's the level of the ego. But the self is architecting this to put pressure on it so you can deal with it, and then surrender to it, and then move through it. And then what's on the other side of it is always a creative burst. And like you'll know it when you hit it. It's a very unique signature of energetic liberation. Yeah. And then that up starts to become the new norm, where you're motivated again, you're inspired. You know, it's like I'm at the moment writing a course for people on splitting from the mother, because it's such it's a hard topic to pin down. And I'm super inspired, so much so like my wrist is hurting because I'm writing so much to get it sorted. And I'm really inspired again by doing that. And what I saw in this transitory period, I thought that my work was going to change. But it wasn't. It was me expressing myself that actually changed. That was the difference this time, because normally your work does shift a bit, But no, I'm actually doubling down on this, going deeper into it. And the way that I'm going to communicate it is different, not what I'm going to communicate.
That's so exciting to hear, like around that, because it is the cultivation that happens in the dead zone that prepares, like the capacity change to be able to bring that creativity in and have something to do with it, right? Like have somewhere to put it. And I love hearing you say that, because I've actually been through a similar thing of like, do I need to change my whole structure because something feels off? And I've been through a similar. Yeah. And then it was literally just yesterday that I was like, oh no. And that doubling down of, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've built. But it is that level of communication, of articulation, of depth that is what changes, right? Because that's your growth. It's like you've just gone through that cultivation phase where you've had to, like meet yourself in a different way and prepare yourself in a new way for a new experience, which will be fatherhood. And that's, like such a massive precipice to come through for you, I'm sure, and for men. But that, coming through that and just going, oh, I just have like a deeper level to offer now.
Yeah.
That's wild. I know that we have to go shortly. So I really wanted to ask you about rites of passage.
Mm-hmm.
And your thoughts on rites of passage for boys, for men, at different like forcible rites of passage, which you seem to have gone through, versus, like actually stepping in willingly to a rites of passage, and how that might shape or change that, like, do we invite chaos or do we take the invitation?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite topics. So the guy I do, I don't really call it a podcast because I think that's just a charged term at the moment, but we're having a series of conversations. A good friend of mine, he's like a brother to me, and he's got a 6-year-old boy. It's about to turn 7. And we were talking about how do we start initiating him. And one of the things was he's going to do is sit out all night and have his son manage the fire. This is what they used to do with Native American tribes. They go out into the wilderness, you start a fire, and you got to keep that fire going throughout the night. For a 6-year-old turning 7, that can be a tough task to stay awake all night on his own. And so with the boys aspect, things like that, every 7 years you want to start putting them into something, because they're going to go through it anyway. And whether it turns out from an adaptive space, which is positive, or maladaptive, which is negative, is going to be how the father connects with the boy to do that. From around 12, 13, 14, they need to be given to other males with the father, like uncles, grandfathers, martial arts trainers, other men, so they can learn by osmosis. So it's important to have good men around. The boy aspect is not really my realm, whereas the adult male is more my realm. And so it's with this, initially rites of passage, what would happen is the boy would be taken from the mother, put through a test or a task, and then he would be marked afterwards with this, like an incision, basically tattooing, some other ones which are more brutal, which I don't agree with, but really he would have to face his fear. That's what rites of passage and initiation is about. It's about facing your fear as a man. So what are you afraid of? The other thing that I do is I get men to engage in a feminine cleanse for anywhere from 3 months to 12 months, where they don't date, don't interact, don't sleep with the feminine. So they get to know who they are without orienting towards the feminine. And this only makes them more able and capable to be able to relate to a woman, because they're not trying to just get sex from her. They're not trying to make her his mother, so they actually become very independent of that feminine influence, which is this is how you become healthy as a male. If you're oriented towards the feminine, you're only going to use her unconsciously and exploit her. You have to be able to become your own mental point of reference and undo your programming around that. And all of your shit comes up when you do this. I did nearly 4 years of celibacy. So I know, because I had a real problem. Women were essentially my drug, unfortunately. And going through that was such a powerful process. And it was the thing that really helped me separate from the mother construct. So it's about looking at your fear. And a lot of guys are so afraid just to separate from the feminine and say, hey, no, look, I got to go it alone for a little bit. You're my friend. I'll honor that, but this is what I'm going to do. And then they go into the wilderness of themselves, the same way that in tribes, they'll put the boy into the physical wilderness. We need to go into the mental and psychological and emotional wilderness to discover who we are without that pull. And so this is what I'll get the men to do. Then we'll move into deeper realms of the dissolution of subconscious programming that's driving them. A couple of the big ones will be I'm not loved, which has an addiction to rejection. So they'll choose unavailable women. In the devouring space, it'll be the program of I don't exist, so they remain invisible. The other, I'm not loved, they'll move into like the Don Juan construct, which they'll just need multiple women again and again and again, and you've got to break that. And these are the initiations. And so generally what I see here is men will suffer from 3 ways that they avoid this. 1 is relation, so it's in relationship. 2 is vocation, so they won't have purpose. And 3 is location, where they move from place to place. So they have to learn to stay and settle. And this is what I get them to implement as well. Yeah, like becoming solid. That's really what you want. A woman will know when she's around a solid man. Her biology will just activate. And you can feel it. And they'll either push up against it and try to challenge it if there's a bit of trauma there, or they'll just soften into it. And that's what's meant to happen. So most of the men that I work with, it's about a year, because going from one end to the other is really, it's like bookends. You've got to start, and then you put a capsule or capstone, whatever. You put a bookend at the other end. You go, this is it, and this has been my journey. But it takes about 12 months, sometimes a little bit longer. And male contact is the way you do it. So when we were boys, we would be removed from the mother, so you've got to split from the mother. Then you've got to dissolve any of the legacy of the father that's in there, so you become your own author, your own authority. So what does that look like from a point of authenticity? Then you need purpose. How does that want to create in the world? How do you want to generate for your people around you? What's your true expression of self as you do that? And you need male contact to do that, because boys in tribes would be given to the elder males, and they would, by osmosis, learn how to be a man. And so that's the way to do it. So that's the initiatory and the modern rites of passage, in my opinion. And it's all internal.
Do you think that there's other ways that we can facilitate that for adult men? I know that there's, like definitely ways that you can bring that through for the young boys, and that we can start to change that within family dynamics and the way that families set that up. And I've heard a lot of actually Maori families in New Zealand creating those rites of passage for boys. But in terms of adult men, are there other ways or that we can facilitate that process for them?
The older males are usually going to have the facilitation process initiated by life. So every single guy that finds me is in the midst of a breakup.
Yes.
So that's the axe. Life has just brought the axe down, and it's like that relationship, that person that left them is just a version of them that they're trying to break up with. That's why it's painful. So they might go, oh, I don't know who I am without that person. It's like, no, that's not it. You don't know who you are without the belief system that you projected onto her to make her substitute. So
and she projected on you as well, I think that's the other aspect, is that as women, we're, it's not, sorry to cut you off, but it's not men are the problem or women are the problem. We're all fucking projecting our shit all over everyone all of the time. And that's the tension and the friction.
Yeah. I always say they're not the problem, but they're always the process. So, which means the other person is the process for you to graduate and move into a more complete state. So nature is always going to try to balance out the most wounded part of itself, and the most wounded part of itself is the human being. And this is why we've got a lot of people lost at the moment. We've got a lot of men that are just completely lost, and they're I hate to say the word weak, but they are, they just fold at the slightest inconvenience. Their phone battery dies and they don't know how to be without their phone for half a day, or they might get a slight injury and then they can't do anything with that. It's just, or they don't want to work, or they don't want to go after something. Well. Yeah. You got to have that, because in order to graduate to the afternoon in life and to the solar masculine, you can't do that without a level of resiliency. And only men that have the resiliency can really guide you through that. And so whenever I talk to men about this, I'm like, just see if he's walked through what you want to walk through. What you like, has he worked through what you're walking through right now? Has he done it? That's a really important attribute to have as well.
Do we respect the position that the person is in that we're asking to be our role model? Like, I think that that's one of those things. It's not like that respect of like that person has passed through something and they hold themselves in a certain way that I look up to or I respect and go, that's something that I need to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like you need guides that have gone through the thing you're trying to walk through. I think that's just such a imperative part of understanding. Otherwise you get like a textbook therapist that hasn't been through much. I remember some of the things I went through earlier in life when I said, and they're like, "Oh my God, really? Did that happen?" And I'm like, "You're not for me," just because I can't relate.
Yeah.
So I think that's
lack
important.
of understanding.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for a very much longer period of time, but I'm well aware that we have to finish up. You have to go. Can you please, for the audience, for everyone that's watching, can you please let them know where to find you and what you've got on offer and how they might be able to work with you if that feels right for them?
Yeah, Instagram, which is Puer Jaguar, Pure, Jaguar as it sounds. YouTube, Pure_Jaguar. I'm putting a lot more effort into YouTube with longer form stuff and conversations. Every Thursday at between 8 and 9 a.m. Brisbane time, Queensland. I do lives now on Instagram just to connect with my audience to see what's going on, and we're talking about more stuff like this. And I do a men's group, which I'm very selective about who I let in because it's the serious work where we do all of what we spoke about today. And I'm designing a splitting from the mother course where we'll be looking at the morning to the afternoon crisis transition in that course, the archetype of the mother structure, how to split from it, and how to dissolve and balance out the eternal boy. So I'm excited about that. So it's just going to be a course you can buy and work at your own pace because it's going to be very heavy in its content. It's going to be a lot of content in there.
Yeah, right. That sounds like something that's very much needed out there as well. And we will
my website is purejaguar.com.
Okay, awesome. And we'll pop your handles in all of the descriptions for this as well so that people can find you.
Mm-hmm.
Jaguar, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for the depth of conversation and the honesty as well. I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us, with the audience and with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. And let's line up a round 2.
Yeah, I was thinking that before. I was like, we might have to do part 2 of this. That sounds
I think we will.
Like a great idea. All right. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
And we will see you guys all next Thursday night for the next The Good Man Paradigm. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Imogen.